Hey there, thank you so much for listening to Something Super Spiritual. My name is Jeffrey Peck, and I am a psychic medium. If you are seeking conversation with loved ones on the other side, or discussion about spirituality, life after life, and anything in between, join me as we discuss all things spirit. We are collectively experiencing a spiritual awakening right now and recognizing that we are much, much more than we once believed. We don't die, and life doesn't end. We are eternal spiritual beings living in this crazy 3D virtual world of existence. Let's talk about it. Hi, guys. Welcome back to Something Super Spiritual here on YouTube, anyway. My guest today is Michael Christopher, an Evidential Medium. And as we were in the thick of our conversation, we were a good 10 minutes in, I think, it dawned on me that I did not hit record. So it was just a cluster for a minute, trying to figure out, okay, I had pressed it, but then I paused it because we needed to talk about a few things and then forgot to go right back there. So anyway, Michael Christopher is an evidential medium with a really amazing story because, like myself, he was not in the crib or in childhood with any spiritual senses. His came to him later in life, in his 40s, after trauma after trauma after trauma. It's really amazing how there are those of us who lifelong know the spiritual senses from the crib, right? And then there are those of us who opened up in the time that we were supposed to through trauma. And whatever trauma, it could be a near-death experience, right? Let's say a really bad car accident, or trauma of losing somebody. I know a number of people. Carrie Alderucci lost her son. Boom, that was her springboard into her spiritual awakening. With Michael, yeah, he lost his brothers to the same lung disease. He lost his sister to a horrifying, brutal murder. And then he himself had a life-threatening disease that could have easily taken him out. So, it's just really interesting. So I'd like to introduce Michael Christopher to you. I'm sorry about the little mishap, although it is Mercury retrograde, and it's just one of those things. Take two, rolling. So anyway, you guys, thank you so much for being here. Happy New Year, by the way. I've got a great lineup of interviews set up for you over the next 3-4 weeks, and I'm really excited about what this year is to come. So I hope you guys enjoy. I'll talk to you soon. Oh, that is
There
an
we go.
absolute first. Oh,
It
this
happens.
retrograde is just nailing me.
Well, it's a chance for me to start over. I mean, I know the story so well, and I
Oh
can, I can,
yeah.
I can, I can condense it, so it's no big deal.
Oh, but
It really
it's
isn't.
compelling. It's really interesting to me because so many of us come into our spiritual senses midlife through trauma.
Yeah.
Okay, so you weren't spiritually aware as a child or as a young
No,
adult.
no, not at all.
I wasn't either. And okay, so yeah, start from the beginning again.
Sure. And this time, I think I will go linear. I'll just start from the beginning and just work up.
Yeah.
So, so as we were just saying, no, I would, up until I was 45, I had no idea that I had this ability. So I will start from, about midway through my Air Force career. I was in the Air Force for 20 years, retired 2009. So, and it's weird now because I look back and it's all part of, I think, a very informal education on what was going to happen down the road, and that's
Right.
how I look back now, and you can see things lined up. So I had a pretty normal life. Nothing woo woo about it.
Mm-hmm.
I joined the Air Force at 19, and there I go. But so my mother ended up remarrying around the same time me and my wife married back in, so 19, sitting here figuring out dates here, everything just blurs all together. So it was 91,
Okay.
and I ended up, she ended up getting married, again, and out of it, I got two new brothers, and they are my brothers. I never considered them my stepbrothers.
Sure.
But Jason and Danny were both born with cystic fibrosis, which is just a horrible illness. But to them, it was their life. They lived perfectly normal as they could. But unfortunately, Jason around 97, he ended up, his lungs started to fail. He was on a transplant. Unfortunately, got to a point where he was too ill. He would have never survived the surgery, so they had no choice but to call it off. Unfortunately, he ended up passing, shortly after that, age 26. So, that was 97, go through that. 99, I was going to go fly planes. I was going to learn how to fly, which required a physical outside of the Air Force. I went for this physical. They found this problem with my kidneys. They're like, you got to get this checked. Long story short, I went and got it checked, biopsies, all that good stuff. Ended up being diagnosed with the kidney disease that was fairly progressed at the time that they found it. And my prognosis was eventually it would fail. It was really, really, progressed at that point. So
Right.
it was going to happen, and at that moment, it was just, a decision for me at that time to learn right then and there. It's like, I have two choices: worry about this every day, or it's there, deal with it, and so I just learned every day to just focus on now and not
Right.
worry about tomorrow, because that could just derail any motivation you have for everything. It was just like, no. So that was my first real life lesson about living in the moment.
Oh,
That's
sure.
all that matters. And that kind of framed up everything and for my future, which the story, it gets crazy. So, I go through that, go to 2001. We're from New York originally. 2001, the trade center gets hit, they have the bombings. My other brother, Danny, was on the transplant list at that time because he had gone into lung failure, same. He ended up having a transplant 2 days after the 9/11 attacks. Went fine, surgery went fine. He was fine, really fine. But around 3 to 5 years, he ended up, the lungs ended up rejecting, which is a part of transplant, and usually they don't do a second, but they did. Pittsburgh hospitals took him on and he ended up getting a second, came out of that fine.
Wow.
And away we go. So that's 2012 ish. I'm trying to keep this straight in my mind because there's so many dates and just so much went on. So all right, so that was, around that 2001. 2009, I retired from the Air Force. A year later, 2010, my kidneys fail, and I was like, here we are. And, going through that, learning or living with that notion or knowing it was going to happen, I thought I had it in my mind, I was prepared. Nothing prepares you for the day that they say, they have failed. You need to start dialysis and we need to start looking at options for transplant. So I remember leaving the doctor's office that afternoon and just driving. I just drove 3 hours just trying to make sense of what just happened. It just facing the reality of what's happened.
Yeah.
And I get home, I tell my wife about the appointment, and I told her right then and there, I was like, I can't do this. I said, I can't. I don't want to go through waiting. I don't want to start dialysis. I don't want to wait for a kidney. I said, I'm done. And, I just told her, I said, I'm just more afraid of living than I am dying at this point. It frightened me so bad about not knowing. There was something in that was just like overpowering. And it was just like, death was easy. Death was the easier option for me in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably the next day or two, I just had this thought, complete 180. I was like, I have to give this a chance. And I just remember having this thought, this feeling, reflecting back on what Jason went through. He didn't have the option of anything. He didn't have, the equivalent to dialysis for lungs. Once they fail, you're done. And I just thought, how can I do this? How can I just give up? And so I made the decision that I would give it a year. We'll go forward. We'll see what happens. I said, but if it doesn't happen within a year, I'm done. I just can't live on a machine.
Mm-hmm.
So fortunately, my other brother tested. was a match for the transplant. So I started dialysis in May of 2010. We had a surgery date set for September 10th, 2010. 2 weeks before the surgery, my brother ends up getting a staph infection, which turns MRSA, which makes him immediately ineligible for the
Oh,
surgery.
yeah.
So, here we are back to square one. And again, at this point, I just had, and I just remember the nurses in the dialysis center. They were some of the best people I think I've ever met in my life. I just kept this just real attitude about it. I was like, this is my life. I'm still alive. I feel good. That's all that matters. And I just, I wasn't one of them that walked in there like just pissed at the world that I got to
Right.
go through this. I was like, no, this is keeping me alive. This is giving me a chance. This is good. And I tried to live as normally as I could. I still exercised every day. I did everything that I could within, my physical abilities at that time. And just having that positive outlook was just everything. It just, did I slip into those dark thoughts? Absolutely.
Sure.
But it was just like the moment I caught myself, I bring myself back like, no, this is good. So 10 days after we find out my brother's ineligible, I had a friend of mine that was in the Air Force with me who reached out. I guess he had heard over Facebook, whatever. So he reached out and he was asking me questions. And I was like, what, are you curious about this? He goes, no, I want to donate. And I was like, what? Out of nowhere, I hadn't talked to him for probably 3 or 4 years. And I was like, okay. So I gave him the information. He contacted the transplant center, went through all the testing, got Air Force approval to do this because he was still active duty. And I'm cutting a lot of the story out, but so he's a match. We go forward December 7th. We go through the transplant, and everything went just fine for both of us. And now I sit, I'm 12 years post kidney transplant. So I can say it's been great. I mean, I've been lucky, very lucky. So as if there's not enough, or if that wasn't enough, we go to, I think it was shortly after my transplant, my brother started going through kidney failure himself, the one who had the second lung transplant. And
Oh,
so he had to start dialysis.
wow.
And so he's looking for a kidney now after everything he's been through, 2 double lung transplants. I used to ask him, I looked at him, I said, dude, I went through this crap once. I don't think I could do this again. How the hell are you going? What keeps you going?
Yeah.
And he had a 7-year-old daughter. I mean, it was just like, so that was everything. But I was just like, talk about mental fortitude. Because I
Yeah.
was like, there's no freaking way. It's like someone's telling me my ticket's being punched. I'm sorry, I can't do this.
Yeah.
But he started dialysis, and about 6 months into that, unfortunately, he ended up developing lymphoma cancer in his lungs. And shortly after that, February of 2012, he ended up passing away at 42 from
Oh,
cancer. So it was just like, here we go again. It was just one of those things that was just, you try to process it, and,
oh, sure.
and then I laugh and snicker now because it's just, you can't write this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm at work one day. This is 2015, August 2015. My mom calls me. She's like, your sister's been stabbed. And I was just like, what do you mean my sister's been stabbed? She goes, we don't know anything more yet. I'll fill you in. Okay. Turns out she was she was a barber, and she was in a shop by herself on a Friday afternoon, middle of the day. Someone had snuck in the back with the intention of killing her or robbing the place. He came out from behind, whatever he did, he ended up stabbing her in the neck twice.
Oh,
She made it out into the street before ambulance came, but by the time they got her to the hospital, she had lost so much blood. They said she had numerous heart attacks before she even went to got her to the
oh my
hospital,
gosh.
and she was 32 at the time. But 2 days after that, she was on life support. They basically said she's gone, she's brain dead. So took her off life support. So she passed.
Oh,
So yeah, you need to process that for a moment. I mean, that's just like, it was just nuts. It was just every time the phone rang, it was like, all right, what's wrong? Because it was
yeah.
never a call about, hey, how you doing? Anytime my mom called, I still have that. It's just like, especially if it's around holidays, because Christmas time for us was always something was brewing. It was just crazy. But so that was that. And again, up until 45, I had no idea this world existed. Now I got to say, I got to add this in because this is an important part. In 2000, when John Edward first started his show on TV, Crossing Over, me and my
Yes.
wife tuned in, and I think that was our first experience with a medium ever.
Okay.
And we were just fascinated by that. We're like, whoa, so we started watching, we started reading books on mediums. I mean, I've probably read, I got a bookshelf full, so I look back now and I was like, all that education was like the best informal education I could have had for what is about to happen.
For what was coming. Yeah.
Yeah. So 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 after Jackie passed, her murder went unsolved for almost 5, and I think it was about the 2-month point. I had actually reached out to a psychic. Now, I had never talked to a psychic, nothing. I was working out one day, I seen this website, and I followed it, and it was about this medium channeling her a son that had committed suicide. And I saw a website, and I clicked, later on I went to it, and I found this part of the website where they had psychics that work on these cases. So I reached out and I just asked, can somebody point me in the direction of somebody who does this work? And 2 ladies reached out to me, and we're close now, but they didn't ask anything of me. They didn't ask for money. They didn't ask, they just started working with me. And I was just like, wow, instant credibility. So again, this is about 2 months into it, and this is where things really, the light switch just came on. I had gotten up for work one morning. It was 5 in the morning by myself. I know it was by myself. My wife was still asleep. We're the only ones in the house. I'm out at the kitchen counter, and I just had that feeling that someone's standing by me. Like I felt somebody walk in the room. So I turn around, nobody's there. It's like, that was weird. Go back to what I was doing. And I get this feeling again, but this time in my mind, I just see my sister, and I see her. It's just weird trying to explain this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking one way, but in my mind, I can see behind me, and I can see her, and she's standing behind me, and she walks up, and she kind of puts her arms around me and puts her head on my shoulder. And again, I see this in my mind, and I feel the energy.
Yeah.
And I was just like frozen because I was like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
First experience, I was just like, what?
Oh,
yeah.
Just gives me chilly bumps when
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's just nuts. So about 20 seconds, I would guess. I mean, I was in shock, and she kind of just pulls away, and that was that. And I was left with wondering what was that. And I didn't say anything to anybody for a couple weeks. And again, I was working with these psychics, and we were talking one day, and I told my friend Linda, I was just like, I got to tell you something. You got to. I don't know what this is, but I had an experience. And I didn't tell her, I don't think I told her anything beyond, I just had this weird experience. And my sister came through to her, and she basically said, tell my brother that was me. And I was just like, okay, I'm not nuts.
Yeah.
That was real. So I was like, okay, good. And it was probably another conversation a week or 2 later with Linda again. We're talking, we're just doing a Skype call. As we're talking, I hear this voice in my head, and I don't remember her father's name exactly now, but I think it was Jim. But anyway, so I hear this voice in my head say, tell her it's Jim. Out of nowhere, I hear this. I'm like,
oh boy.
I ignored it because I was like, what the hell is that? We continue to talk. I hear it again, same thing, tell her it's Jim. And I was just like, ignored it. Third time, he's like, I passed with cancer, tell her it's Jim.
Oh my
I
gosh.
stopped her. I was just like, Linda, I said, I don't know what the hell's going on, but I said, I'm hearing this voice, and this man is telling me that he passed the cancer and his name is Jim. And she's like, that's my dad. And I was just like, what the hell is happening?
What is happening?
And that's kind of where it really started. And she goes, well, you're a medium. And I'm like, no, I'm not. We had this debate for a good 5 minutes. And I'm like, the hell I am. No, I'm not. And I mean, I could stop there and give you a moment because there's, that's where things really start, walking into this path.
It's just, it's amazing. I too don't have the story where I had things happening in the crib, right?
Yeah.
In 2007, or 2006, I was attuned to the Reiki. And the Reiki, the side effect for me was that it ignited all the spiritual senses. And I was like, what's happening? This, I felt like I was going crazy.
Yeah.
And the mediumship just started happening while I was working on people, with Reiki treatments. And suddenly I've got their grandparents or parents or whomever in the room with us. And I'm like, so yeah, it's amazing how there are I'm finding more and more, there are more of us that are coming into this awareness midlife,
Yeah.
either through trauma or the trauma of losing a loved one, or other people with Reiki. The Reiki ignited theirs as well. So I think it's just fascinating. Your work is, I mean, it just speaks for itself. It's so much fun to watch you on your lives. And
Thank you.
okay, so that was 2015.
Hmm.
Um, okay, so what happened after that? Like, how did you start to progress? Did you find a teacher? Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, what happened?
Yeah. So the two women I was referring to, Linda and my other friend, they were both like, you should really take a development course. It's just the beginners. It's just that, basically to explore, and
Yeah.
maybe find out what's going on. So I was like, okay. And which led me to my first teacher, who's just a great friend of mine now. We've been close ever since. But it was funny because I started this class. It was just a 4-week intuition development course, and it was basically like it was a 4-week program. Each week we'd learn a new clair. So the first week, clairvoyance, then clairaudience, clairsentience, and then whatever other one we were studying.
Yeah.
So I got to say this though, before this class, I had no idea what a medium truly was, because again, reflecting back to John Edward, he never really talked about how he experienced spirit. So in
Right.
my mind, spirit, people who were mediums saw spirit like they do people.
Yeah, with your
They saw them externally.
objectively, with your eyeballs.
Yeah,
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 I thought
heard
that
them
too.
that way. So that was my impression. So we start week 1, clairvoyance, and we start talking about it. And I learned that I think it's like 2% of people who do this actually see physically,
Mhm,
and they experience outside their mind,
mhm,
objective mediumship. The
mhm.
rest is all internal subjective. And I was just like, wait a minute. And then when she started talking about how we see things mentally in our third eye, in our mind's eye, just like if right now, if I was to say, can you imagine a rose in your mind?
Yep.
Most of us can picture a rose in our mind. And I was like, wait a minute. And like the light started flickering. And then the next week was clairaudience, same thing. I'm like, all right, so it's self-talk. So it's like I'm hearing my own voice, but it's actually spirit.
Yes.
And I was just like, whoa, wait a minute. And I started to get excited about that, and the weeks go on and we start working with it. And I was just like, whoa. Then I started looking back, throughout my life, and I'm like, all right, I can pinpoint a time where this happened and this happened.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh my God, it was there. It was everywhere. I just was not aware. I had no idea it was like that, because I was always intuitive. I always had that gut feeling like, stay away from this person. We all
Yeah.
have that. But there was times now I look back and I was like, holy snikes, that
Yes.
saved, So it was funny because we get off done with that class, and she's like, you need to take this intermediate class with me. And that's where we actually started doing readings. Now keep in mind, this is like my first exposure.
Yeah.
1 month I've been doing this. So we get into the second class, and she has us doing these practice readings. She would set up clients and we would do it. And again, I'm like fresh, I'm green as can be. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, I'll play along. And I remember to this day, she brought in a sitter. So there was on the Zoom screen, it was like her, me, and the sitter. So she says, all right, you got 5 minutes, whatever, just, whatever comes through. So I start doing this reading. And the woman that I'm reading after we're done, she goes, where do I pay you for this? Because she's like, how long have you been doing this? I'm like, about 4 weeks. And even Mimi, I could see her eyes, I could see her facial expression in the peripheral. And she was just sitting there like, you know, normally you don't have somebody this connected who's only been doing this 4 weeks. I had no idea. To me, this is my normal at the moment.
Yeah.
So we get done with that class, and she was like, we got to talk. she goes, I have this project that I do. I don't really go into the specifics about that because unfortunately the project's over. But it was basically like mediumship, and I would work with her. And I'm like, why would you ask me to do? I don't know what I'm doing. She's like, I've been teaching for years, and you're different. I'm like, okay. Again, this is my norm. I don't think anything of it. But as I start to do these readings and I got to back up because the way I really started working, I created a Facebook group with the sole purpose of just doing readings. I was like, I'm going to have people sit with me. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to just see what happens.
Sure.
And that's kind of how I've always been. It's like, I want to do things my own way. I get the tools, but I want to do it because that's how I learn for me. So I just started doing readings for anybody that would sit for me. I would just start doing them and doing them. So she had asked me, again, I start meeting these, those other mediums, and they start to see me work, and they're like, how long you been doing this? I'm like, 4 months, 3 months. And, you can see the head tilt. They're like, well, I've been doing this 20 years, and I'm like, and it was odd. It was just weird. It was just like, and I'm not trying to paint the picture that this was easy, like it was all there day one and everything was peachy. I had to work my butt off. And I still do. I mean, it's constant, that. But I just had no fear about it. I didn't care. And maybe, we talked about a lot of us coming into this midlife. I mean, honestly, when I was that age, I had been through so much.
Oh my gosh, no kidding.
I didn't care what people thought. It's like, I have this mission. I don't know, there was something inside of me that just drove me to do this. And I was like, maybe being in the military was a good thing because I have thick skin. I mean, it's just as part of being in the military. So it's like someone telling me criticism that I don't know, I don't care. You don't bother me. I don't know you.
Yeah, I love it.
So I just started doing it. And it was probably 4 or 5 months. Somebody asked me to do a group reading, live group reading. It was funny because we were in this crystal shop. We'd only been in there a couple of times, and my wife heard the manager up front talking to this lady about wanting a medium. My wife starts nudging me in the side. She goes, tell him you're a medium. I'm like, I ain't no freaking medium yet. And, she's like, just go talk to him. I'm like, are you guys talking about mediums? And they're like, yeah, do you know one? I'm like, well, I kind of am one, I think, And we got talking, and, they're close friends now, the manager at the store at that time. But she's like, would you consider doing a group reading for the store? I'm like, all right. And I just said yes. I didn't even think about it. I was like, sure, why not? And it didn't settle in until after I left the shop that what I just got myself into. And I was like, whatever, and I told her, I said, I'm not charging. Well, this is for me to learn from. So just let people know this is just an experiment. And I actually did I did a donation-based thing, and it was for the animal shelter. I said, you know what? I'll do it for donations. If people want to donate, the money's going to go to the animal shelter.
Yeah.
So I go to this thing, and it was only supposed to be 15 people, like 30 people end up showing up.
Oh.
So I'm standing up in front of everybody, telling them what's going on, explaining again, this is new. And I think it was the first 20 minutes, it was crickets. It was kind of like, because I got to say, at this point, I was used to asking people when I sat with them, who do you want to hear from?
Right.
I didn't know that most people wait for the spirit to come in. I was very direct. I was like, who do you want to hear from? And they were there, so I had to switch mindset from that environment to doing group where you can't really do that. You kind of just open up.
Yeah.
So I was learning that night how to just open and let them come in. And about 20 minutes into it, I was like, got something, and I started making connections, and, awkwardly made my way through that gallery for about 2 hours.
Oh, that's so awesome.
And from there, I just kept doing them. I have a habit of just putting myself in uncomfortable situations and just, that's the way this work is. It's like, so I just somebody would ask me, and I'd be like, sure. And I'd be like, shit, I did it again. And then I'd go do another gallery. But between that, the Facebook lives, and I got to say, this project, I got to go back to this, and I'll stop. So I want to give you a chance because I can just ramble.
I love it.
But going back to this project I worked with Mimi at the time, and I'll tell you what it was. It was just, we used to interview celebrities, but we did it different. It was like her way of doing it was so authentic. Nothing was scripted. Half the people she brought to me, I didn't know who these people were because she was into French art and all this.
Mhm.
So there was these people that I didn't know, and I didn't. We would do it, and then later she would validate what I brought through, and I was just like, "What the heck?" I didn't know, or I don't remember her saying it, or she told me and I just forgot. But she was putting these out on her YouTube channel.
Oh,
So I ended up setting up a website somewhere in between there. And all of a sudden I started getting people reaching out to me. They're like, "Hey, I'd like to book a reading." I'm like, how did you know about me?" And they're like, "You're on YouTube." I'm like, "No, I'm not." And I end up finding out that all these interviews were on her YouTube channel and people literally around the world finding out about me. And I was just like, "What the heck?" To this day, I never advertise, and it's always been word of mouth, but that's where that really started
that's
because
amazing.
people found me on Facebook, and literally just things started happening. You talk about divine intervention,
I was
putting
just
on your path.
totally, I was just going to say that.
It was like I look back now and I said there was something in play here well beyond me, because it was crazy. Within a year or two, the audience that I had grown was just like, how the hell did this happen?
Right. Right.
you know? And I started doing these Facebook Lives, and I still have people like seasoned mediums that are just have this fear about doing them. I'm like, you got to do them. You have to. I said, if nothing else, it's the best informal training for doing gallery readings because it's so awkward. You have to learn to be uncomfortable with silence. You have to have patience. So there's so many tools within it, but I just started doing them. No, there was nothing in mind about where this was going. Again, I don't really, to this day, I don't look past right now. I still don't because of everything I go through. So people ask me, what do you plan? I don't plan anything,
Yeah.
but things just started happening, and
Ah,
one thing led to another. And just, I've met some just the most awesome people, in the world. I mean, I've worked with mediums on literally probably every continent in the
yeah.
world. It blows my mind.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind what's happened.
I love your fearless, just go fearlessly. It's just like, it's so inspiring. Okay. So with regard to spirit,
Yes.
how has your spiritual self changed? Your spiritual beliefs, your spiritual before your sickness, before your sister passed. Was spirit part of your life? Were you spiritual? Did you believe in an afterlife? Did it ever occur to you to think about it? Did you grow up with
So
religion?
religion, I was brought up, raised Roman Catholic. But by the time I left for the military, I started to question religion. And that was just my personal thing that a lot of things just weren't adding up to me. And I decided, no, this is not for me. As far as spirit, medium, none of that. I think, again, when Jason first passed, that was my first look into what's happening. But then when I got sick and that happened, that gets the wheels turning on. You start looking around at what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think at that moment when I first was diagnosed and all that, that was my first like look into maybe spirituality, that I didn't know that's what it was called, but you
Sure.
start wondering what's next.
Mm-hmm.
And even now I'm kind of different from a lot of people in a way that I have not changed who I am. I don't, my belief is I know there's an afterworld. I always say I'm 99% sure because I won't know till I'm there.
Oh,
I
truth. Yeah,
know,
yeah.
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Um, but and people get a kick out of this because look, I'm me. I have not changed. I still eat meat. I still drink beer. I still cuss like a sailor.
Yeah.
I have not changed. And I tell spirit all the time, and I do this jokingly, but I'm serious at the same time especially when I'm doing lives and people ask me questions, I'm like, look, I look at them and I go, you picked me. Just remember that. You know what you were getting. You knew
Yeah.
what you were getting. um, so my outlook on what I do and what this is, I'm a very basic person. Too much information, I just get out of the way.
Yeah.
So I go right to the source. Now, if I'm off track with your question, please let me know. But I want to put this out there that I wasn't a meditator. I still don't meditate as often. I do, but it's for a different purpose now.
Right. Right.
Because in the beginning, I was taught, Mimi taught us you got to meditate, you got to open up the spirit, blah, blah, blah. And that's your opening. after a few weeks of that, I was like, I'm very impatient. I'm like, and I sit and I think a lot about everything.
Yeah.
I signed her one day. I'm like, why do I got to do this? Why do I have to meditate to talk to spirit? I don't have to do this to talk to a person. Spirit's all around us. Why do I need to do this? And I said to myself, the next session, I'm just going to sit and go. And guess
Yep.
what? Spirit was there.
Yep.
It was in that moment I was like, okay, media or meditation has its purpose. It's important. I still believe it's important.
Yes.
But it's not necessary to communicate with spirit.
Yeah.
That's what I have found. They're there, and it's just a matter of switching your awareness to them. The
Completely.
minute you speak, or the second you think of spirit world, you're connected.
Totally.
And that's what I found.
So yeah, that's really, that was my experience too. At the beginning, I thought I had to sit and prepare like for an hour before a reading. I'd like sit and meditate, silence, prayer, whatever, with, crystals or whatever. Right. And then after a few months of that, I did a practice reading for a mediumship teacher in England. And she was like, don't do that. You don't have to do that. You just show up. If you want to take 2 minutes to calm yourself, yes, but you just have to show up. Yeah. And I was like, okay. So the next time I was like, all right, guys, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to right up to the last minute and I'm going to go sit down and boom. And you're right. You're absolutely right.
They're there, and when I teach classes, night one, minute one, that's the first thing I look at. I tell them, it's like, look, you can learn about chakras. I still don't know about energy. I should by now. I know a little bit more now, but I was like, I go, my sole purpose, my mission is to talk to spirit, and that's what I do. And I cut out a lot of the white noise in the beginning because I want them to understand from day one. It's like that all that other stuff has a place, but I want you to understand spirit is all around you. They're not somewhere else. It's not a magic trick. You don't have to go through rituals. You sit. The second you think of them, you are in their world. You are connected. They're there waiting on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I prove it to them because they make a connection that night, some way. I'm like, there you go.
Evidence comes flying through.
Yep.
So, okay. So since 2015, what did you find challenged you? What was difficult in your development? Would you find difficult?
Now, I know I had difficulties. I know there were. I'm just, again, I think for me personally, because yes, I've taken classes, but in the beginning, those were the only two I took. And from there, it was kind of like, I'm going to go on my own. So I didn't know anything else. So there was none of this, okay, this is what so-and-so taught me. I got to do this, or this is what this teacher taught me. So I got to, and that's another story in itself, too many teachers. But anyway, so I kind of just started doing my own thing and learning how I know I had difficulties. It's hard to pinpoint. I don't want to make it sound like this was easy for me because again, it wasn't.
Right.
But I just kind of just did my thing. I didn't try to define what I did. I didn't try to fully understand or comprehend it. I just did it. And I would just sit here. A lot of time I would just sit here and thought and like, why does this happen? What makes sense to me? So there's a lot of self just inflection, if that's a word, and just discovering on my own and just going after things that piqued my curiosity, and definitely, learning that when you're not making a connection, it's not that you're doing something wrong. Like we all go through that. So the first time I guess I encountered that wait, they're not there. What's wrong? What am I doing wrong? And luckily I had people to talk with and like, no, that's normal. You're going to have sessions that are going to be loud and clear, and some you're going to feel like you can't, it's like pulling teeth.
Totally.
So once you learn that little thing, so those little things, the things we normally go through in our development, learning about why all of a sudden do I feel like I want to stop doing this and run away? I'm just, it was burnout. I didn't know what burnout was. All of a sudden I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore, And then after a couple of weeks, I'm like, okay, now I feel like I want to go back. So it was learning about the ebb and flow of the energy, and just learning that, spirit's a three-way thing. It's between the medium, the spirit, and the person sitting in front of you.
Yeah.
That energy is all entwined. So if something's out of whack, it's going to affect the energy of the
Yeah, yeah.
session.
Hmm.
So those
Hmm.
little nuances and stuff like that, I would definitely say were difficulties,
Hmm.
but you just learn about them and,
You do.
have a good network of people that you can talk with to help you understand that this is normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you, now that you've been doing this as long as you have, what do you believe happens after we die?
So my belief is that, once we leave our body, that we go somewhere. And I believe that whatever thought we have of what that afterlife is going to be, my feeling on that is that's what we're going to experience. So for me, I've always, I don't know where I've read so many books, but I read that, you can pre-plan, if you want to live in a cabin in the woods, so that's my mind. It's like when I cross over, I want to go to my cabin on this little lake, and that's going to be my afterlife for a while,
Awesome.
so, I just, it's kind of a mix of we'll just see what happens, but I just have this in my mind of, this is what it's going to look like to me,
Yeah.
and we'll see how that pans out.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you think, a lot of people ask me, after we cross over, after our loved ones
Mhm.
are on the other side, I had one lady that was so upset. She was in the thick of grief. I mean, she was in the
Mhm.
thick of grief. And she was so upset because a medium she had sat with the week or two before told her that she couldn't talk with her husband or whomever it was. I think it was her husband. Couldn't talk with him because he had already reincarnated. I know.
I tell people it's like, look, first and foremost, mediums do not have all the answers. I tell people it's like, man, I don't know any more than you do. I have just learned to communicate with them, which everybody is capable of doing. I've had little glimpses. I've had what comes through in readings, and
Yep.
I have the information I've read in books. I don't think it's anybody's. I don't know. It's tough because I don't think we should be telling them things like that.
No.
I think that's because I've read that we can incarnate many times at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
I've had that thought too. What if I go to the other side? My sister's already back here, so now I don't get to see her. So my thought is, and I've read this, I've heard other mediums talk about it, that only a small portion of our soul comes into this body, like less than 10%. The rest of us, our higher self,
Yeah.
maybe. I've heard people talk about that. We're still on the other side.
Yeah.
So there's always this come and going.
Yeah. The way I see it is it's like our soul is the hard drive of a computer.
Mm-hmm.
And this life that I'm experiencing right now is a file on the inside of that hard drive. And past lives are other files in that hard drive. So
Mm-hmm.
we are still there and we're here at the same time. And if our loved one, I truly believe that our soul family, our soul group, we travel together. I believe that
Yes.
we all hang out and wait for each other, But at the same time, if somebody decides to come back, they're still there when we get there. That personality, that aspect of their soul still comes to us when we cross over.
Yes. I that's a good analogy. That's perfect because yes, we have our soul families, our soul groups on the other side. And I always talk about the books by Dr. Michael Newton, who talks about
Oh,
life between lives.
yeah, yeah.
you know so I always say I have this funny feeling that when I was there planning this, I'm here on like a triple dog dare. Someone says I'm not going back. Well, I triple dog dare to go back again. I'm like, okay, here I am. And I'm like, damn it, they did it again. They're like, look what he's going through now, that sucker. We told him don't do
Yeah.
it.
Another thing that a lot of people ask me, what is an example of a session that you had with somebody where you truly witnessed the springboard of healing that was being offered to them through this connection with whomever it is they desperately needed to hear?
this this always comes forefront in my mind. And it's a little bit long, but I will. This
That's
this
okay.
right here is something that I'll never forget ever. I was at a point where I was ready to just pack it up and walk away. And I go through this quite often. And I remember vividly talking to my sister on the other side, going, I need something. I need something to keep me going, because right now I'm just ready to be done. So the crystal shop that I mentioned earlier,
Yep.
we would normally go a couple times a month, and it was at the next town down. So we would normally go on a Friday. This time we went on a Thursday. We would normally go out to eat before. This time we decided, let's go afterwards. So we go in this crystal shop, and as soon as I walked in, something felt different. It was just like, just something was off. Something was very odd. My friend who was up front, she was up working at the counter, doing her thing, and there was only one other person in the room, and she was over in the corner looking at some things. And I go up to my friend, I'm like, what's up? She goes, it's just nuts in here today, or just crazy. I said, I'm the crazy one. I talk to dead people. The woman that was over in the corner, just her head spun around, and she came right up to the counter, and she just hugged me. She grabbed me and hugged me.
Oh,
Because I've been looking for somebody like you. And, just, oh my God. And she wanted, a session. And at that point, I told her, I said, well, I'm on a break right now, but here's my card. As soon as I'm back, well, I'd be happy to sit down with you. So she hugged me again. She was just lit up. And as we're talking more, we go back to talking to my friend, and me and my wife and her. And all of a sudden I start feeling this presence, and I'm not one of those to go up to people. I don't go up to anybody and give them like spontaneous readings.
right.
But something was going on, and I felt this presence. I felt this man, and I knew it was connected to her. And she happened to be up front, and I said, I'm just curious. I said, would you be, open for a message? I said, I don't normally do this, but, we're in a crystal shop. You're open to this, obviously. Would you be up for a message? She goes, yes. I said, I have a man coming through that is showing me that he took his life. She dropped to the floor.
Oh,
complete hysteric, crying her eyes out. And I'm like, oh my God.
oh my God, it's right.
5 minutes straight, she's just like, why? Yeah. And actually, she's okay with me telling this story, because I told her, I said, I talk about this all the time, because that day it was about her and I, for two different reasons.
Totally.
So she stands up, she composes herself, and I asked my friend, I said, can I use one of your Reiki rooms so we can go sit down and talk? So we go back, and it was her boyfriend. So he ended up taking a gun, shooting himself in the head right in front of her.
Oh,
And of course she's like, why, why did this happen? And I remember every detail, and normally I don't, but and I'll keep the details private. But he was going through a recent diagnosis that wasn't pretty, that led to it, and it was out of fear, because he said to her, the moment I crossed, I knew I shouldn't have done this. But then he went into other things, just validating things, just one thing after another, and she's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And it was towards the end. It was the last thing. And I said, he's doing this right now. I said, I don't know. Did he have an earring? And it was one of many moments where her jaw just was like, oh my God. And she put her hand up. She goes, we used to work in a bar together. And if we were across the room, that's how we used to tell each other that we loved you. I love you. And that was, the session.
that's amazing.
After that, we're still in the room. She goes, and her demeanor at the time was night and day between the time we walked in and the time we walked out.
Yeah.
But before we left, she had told me that this was to a point that it had been 2 years. And then, she was having trouble going on. And basically she said, without saying it, that saved her life. And she goes, I haven't smiled for 2 years. And this is going to be a good year. She just lit up. I mean, it was just like, even when we went out, my wife and my friend were like, what the hell happened? The energy, even when we were in there, they felt the energy shift in the store. It was just amazing.
That is amazing.
It's not done yet. There's one more part.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
We're driving home, right? And we're driving. It's a 2-hour drive. So I'm just in my own world. And my sister, I hear her all of a sudden. She goes, "Was that a big enough sign?" To say I lost it, it would be an
Seriously.
understatement. I forgot all about those a couple weeks ago where I was bitching about I need something. I need something.
Yeah.
Well, I got it.
You got it. That's beautiful. You know, to be a witness as we are of that healing, the power in spirit that
Yeah.
we access and touch. It's just miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle. And
Yeah.
that experience you had, been given that opportunity for her and for you, it's just
Yeah. It's
awesome.
I reflect on that, but I have all the time doing is that's probably at the top of when I start going through these periods of why do I do this? Why do I put myself through this? It's just moments like that that bring me back and remind me that yes, I still have the choice. It's my choice if I want to do this or not, but I see what it does for people. I know what it did for me when I was going through all that stuff. I didn't have
Yeah.
mediumship readings that would have probably made some things a little bit better, but knowing that we go on in some way, I know we can't heal everybody. We can give them messages, but I think that it gives it does. It gives them a little bit of hope that okay, there's the possibility, even if they don't believe it, they can at least now consider the possibility that there's more after the physical world.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's when I was going through my illness, that's what kept me like from probably going into a deep depression, is knowing that if this doesn't work out, I know there's more.
Yeah.
I know there's more.
Completely.
And that was just from watching John Edward on TV and reading books. I never had an experience with a medium until, after I was a medium. So
Yeah. That's a good point. I'm thinking back on my own. I think I had experienced a medium maybe once, and yeah, that's a good point. Interesting.
yeah. So
So
yeah, it's
what would you like to leave for the listeners? Any words of wisdom, any last minute nuggets that you might be able to share?
yeah. And I always go with something that's like just at the top of my mind right at the moment. And I think it's just, allow yourself to be curious. Even if you don't believe in mediums, you don't believe in after, just at least allow yourself to be curious enough to maybe take a look and consider, like I said, consider the possibility that there's more. You don't have to get a reading, you don't have to look anything beyond that, but just I can speak from personal experience, just having that thought notion, knowing that there's the possibility that there's more. Again, when I was going through everything I've been through, it's just there's something in that just little piece that gives you peace of mind, and maybe eases whatever discomfort you're going through. That okay, this isn't, maybe it's not just the lights out, darkness, you're done, there's nothing more. I just think people just give yourself that opportunity to be curious and just consider the possibility that there's more.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
That would be it. See, I pulled that straight out of nowhere.
Where can people find you?
So my website's michaelchristophermedium.com. I'm on Facebook, just Michael Christopher Evidential Medium. And I'm also on Twitter. And I can't remember my Twitter handle at the moment. It's something like Michael Medium 53, I believe.
Okay.
Or at Michael Medium 53. Yeah, that is it.
And YouTube?
Yeah, I always forget about YouTube. Yeah, I just started. I've had a channel for forever, and I've just started doing my live videos and broadcasting them also to YouTube. So I
Excellent.
know there's a couple of videos out there floating around,
All right. And
especially on Facebook.
there's gonna be one more soon.
Yes. No, this is great. I appreciate this invitation to join you. I
Oh,
really do.
thank you so much for being here. This has just been an inspiration. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again for listening to the Something Super Spiritual podcast. If you know someone who would enjoy this episode, please do share it with a friend. For show notes, links, and to purchase a mediumship reading, my website is somethingsuperspiritual.com. You can also easily subscribe and follow the show on your favorite app, sign up for my newsletter for bonus content, and to keep the conversation going, you can easily join the Facebook community. It's all right there at the website, somethingsuperspiritual.com. Signing off for now, namaste.